now, please, all speakers, you are welcomed on the stage. We will go further with the discussion.
Ja mēs vismaz domāsim par to.
Okay, well, we all heard great, interesting presentations, and actually at the moment Latvia, from a potential grey list country, has become the first country to be recognized as complying with all FATF technical recommendations, and we have not only strict rules regarding due diligence and reporting issues, but also one of the widest opportunities to share AML-CFT data, even at EU level, and recent regulation that entered into force on 12 July and what Jekaterina also mentioned in her presentation regarding shared KYC utilities is one of the most progressive we have seen. We also do not lack innovative and technologically strong companies. We see that companies are working, creating, and they seem to have something big to offer. However, in a situation when there's definitely is a bubbling environment of innovations, innovative companies, there is no flame in Regtech area to work very effectively. And our main goal today in today's discussion is it won't be to find a solution to any problems, but more to understand why it is like that, so that we could afterwards formulate some maybe tasks for all the participants to do in the future. In all your presentations you mentioned the topics regarding regulation, regarding cooperation, and first of all I would like to put on the floor the issue regarding cooperation. Therefore, how we can deal with efficiency in cooperation, what are the main challenges and barriers at the moment to cooperate more effectively? For each and one of you I will ask about cooperation between sectors, and first question goes to Jānis about cooperation between Fintech sector and regulators. What are the main barriers, main challenges at the moment to make the cooperation more effective? Please.
I'll try to be brief, but I think the main challenge I've seen to date is the tendency of the regulators to overregulate, which is a natural reaction to fintechs which provide a new service, new field, something that government entities or regulators have very little experience with. So the natural reaction to this at first is to prohibit everything and let just a small gap in the door open. And then if you come back and start complaining that I can't operate in this environment, you have to open the door a little bit more, then they will listen, which is a totally different approach if you look at more pragmatic societies, in old Europe, where you let the fintechs come up with a service, and then if the regulation is required, you put the regulation on top, but you don't start with the regulation.
Thank you very much. Therefore, next question goes to Jekaterina. How you think whether the topics Jānis mentioned really is in place? Do a regulator needs more experience, more understanding in the fintechs to understand how to regulate them better? And what are the side from your side? How maybe fintech side can improve their agenda with you?
You see, I think that we have heard even now that regulation it's a little bit led, the technologies and etc. But it's normal because first you you have innovation, you create something, and then when it starts work, while it's working without the problems, you do not need regulation. But when starts problems, then people comes and they ask for the responsibility. Who is responsible? And then, if there's lack of the regulation, you do not know who is responsible, and you cannot protect your rights. And I think in the fintech, it's as well. It's very sensitive role for the people because it's their money, it's their income, it's what they make each day from what they live each day, so they are quite sensitive on this data and at all, and that's why maybe there is no trust in many new techniques or technologies because you think, oh, it's some application and they will disappear in my phone and all my money will disappear maybe, and that's why I think that if the person will see regulation, then person understands, okay, somebody protects me because there is regulation. Nevertheless, for the personal data protection, I think that there is a good example of the GDPR because it has very open clauses, principles that you have. Like you have to have organizational and technical measures, and these technical measures could be afterwards adopted to the new technologies. You have to process your personal data, for example, on the legal basis. Okay, you have to have one purpose. This purpose could be changed. So in this case, maybe this regulation that could be also in the fintech sphere and field, it's like more general and more about the principles and not very straight rules.
Thank you. I heard one very a few times mentioned word today. It's word trust, and think it will be one of the cornerstones to build to make the process more effective. But regarding effectiveness of process, we cannot, of course, stay out with the time frame, and banks need the solutions now. They needed these solutions even yesterday. Therefore, maybe Vladislavs, from your side, what are the main things you need to deal in cooperation with, from banking side, with fintech? What are the obstacles that are put in place at the moment?
I first of all maybe a bit come back to this fintech and the bank area a bit because if we think that there are limitations for the fintechs to innovate, then I would say that there are even bigger limitations for banks to innovate. And us coming from the financial institution which is trying to innovate across the board, we always facing the solution that actually need to go for a lot of triggers and limitations, and then you engage in a lot of discussions. But I think there is a big problem when you have financial institution, the big financial institution, suddenly some fines for the wrongdoings or gaps which you can have, they actually can harm your financial stability, and that brings like a lot of problems in this equation. So, and then it comes in the same way also to the collaborations with the fintechs, because in order to bring some solutions, you need to make sure that it's good and sustainable. You need to make sure that something what you bring for your customers will really exist and last, because if you suddenly bring some innovation in and you embed it fully into your processes and ecosystem, and this innovation disappears in some months, you are in a big trouble because your service is interrupted. So for banks, it's coming again to something what you mentioned is a trust. So you need to make sure that this solution is trustful, it's good enough. But also, if I come back to my presentation, we are in a world where without collaboration and good cooperation between both bank and fintechs, we will not move further. Because the services which we offer through the digitalization, they become wider and wider every day. And none of the financial institutions will be able to capture entire agenda. So each financial institution will need to figure out where they're gonna focus, and they will do certain innovation themselves where they see the focus, and for certain innovations they're gonna engage with the fintechs, with the right fintechs which can deliver the scope and bring a trust for customers.
Thank you, Vladislav. When I am going to Līga, do you see where banks are focused and how the cooperation with banks are going from fintech side, please?
My comment from the fintech side is that cooperation with the banks is very slow. It's very hard. It's also the trust question, yes, and we are also early stage fintech, and it's kind of very hard to break this, yeah. And but now we have already our first external testing customer, which is bank, and we see that the cooperation is very good. We receive very good feedback, and we improve our solution. So I think it's possible. But from the government and regulator side, we expect more mentoring and also some advice and detailed explanation, because our team is very small, and we would appreciate if there will be detailed explanations or how we can implement some legal aspects.
Yes, thank you, Līga. I heard from all of you more or less a positive side in future, but some things that are at the moment stopping you from letting it work more efficiently. One of them, of course, was in all of your words, regulative aspect. Well, then once again, I would like to step one step backwards and ask for all of you the question, what exactly the problems in regulation is, and please mention one overall example and also one exact example where you see the problem. Vladislav, can you start, please?
I think Jānis mentioned that very well. It's about, we have a sandbox by the regulator, which is fairly well set, but the sandbox is like a little bit open door. So when we were first approached with the same onboarding, willingness maybe to be part of this sandbox, then I can't remember exactly by heart the number, but I think he said, okay, yeah, you can do it. I think it was some 5,000 or 10,000 customers you can try to go through this sandbox. And then the question was, and what's then? Then it was probably gonna stop until the regulation is there. So I think it's good to put a tool and name it in the same way as developed countries did that. But I think it's not enough to get this gap that small. So we need to actually create infrastructure which allows the innovation, because I think where innovation comes is like, it comes in a lot of collaboration and a lot of ideas coming together until you actually figure out the truth. And you actually never know how the final solution gonna look until you went through this process, tested it, proved that, and then at that moment you need some specific regulation. So our example, yeah, it was very simple. So we understood that we cannot use the process, and we tried to find the loopholes how we can do it. And as it was in my example, our loophole was the courier, which was bringing the document for signature while we were waiting for regulation to come.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really a digital solution. Yeah, it's right, Jānis, you mentioned already a lot of regulative aspects, but maybe you can mention one good example that you have seen in your international experience.
Well, if we look and compare the success stories that we see across Europe, we see that the regulation is not the primary ingredient for something to become successful, especially in particular example, financial crime. To fight successfully financial crime, you first and foremost need a commitment from financial sector, and regulation will follow. Because once there is a commitment, everything else can be done. Everything else can be sorted out, discussed with supervisors, regulators, and agreed to. But the first is a group of leading players in the sector to come together, as it happened with Nordic KYC utility, and agree on a minimum set of data points and principles for processing this data that will be then used by everyone. And they, in effect, created the gold standard KYC client file for the Nordic market. And now they're pulling all other market participants, both obliged entities and ordinary companies, along. But they were the pioneers, and that is the key ingredient.
Thank you. Actually, I would say that AML-CFT regulation created a commitment that eventually created a commitment to create a regulation how to deal with the information sharing issues. But you're definitely right regarding that, and commitment is needed to work more effectively. Well, Līga, how do you think, whether it's more regulation in banking sector or more regulation in fintech sector that are putting us somewhere not so on a fast track?
I think that more in banking side, because in fintechs we operate quite freely, and we need to take into the consideration data legislation, but we see the most barriers are in the bank side. We see that most problems are on the bank side.
Okay, thank you. We will take a note regarding that. And Katerina, in both in public and private sector, biggest value, of course, is people who works in it and who works also from a regulator point of view. Is public sector ready for innovations, knowing that regulation must be applied for future solutions? Is there something that can be done to improve ability to adapt without changing regulation?
From the public sector or private sector?
Both.
As I mentioned before, I think that I fully agree with Jānis that everything is, if honestly, depends on commitments and wish of people. Because if you wish to do something good in a good way, in the right way, that you can do it without regulation. The problem is that in many cases we see that people do not want to act in a good way, and this is the problem, and this problem cannot be resolved by the regulation. I think that, as I mentioned, regulation maybe have to be more broader and more open for the next innovations, but what we can do with the regulation, that maybe we can be more as well open or I don't know, confident as supervisory authorities to make recommendations, because I think that, for example, in many European countries and even on the EU level, this recommendation, they're not legislative measures, but they are measures which helps to write quite more, to maybe to describe certain situation, to describe certain questions or measures, but okay, they are not legislative power, but then the companies, private sector, even like public sector, can see how it's better to act. And I think that maybe we can go also from the public sector point of view, to have more this explanation and recommendations what public sector wants from these companies and wants from private sector, then you say in advance, if you do this, this and this, then it will be okay. If you do not do this and this, then maybe you will have a problems. So because within the innovations you cannot regulate them, they are still in the implementation process, in the innovation process. And if you want, if we will try to regulate everything and then implement it, we will never have anything new. So nevertheless, we have to have quite opened borders and possible maneuvers for the private sector.
Well, thank you. Vladislav, how do you think whether more narrow regulation with more recommendations and examples how to apply this regulation, would it help? And what is the experience in Baltic level?
Yeah, I don't think that a narrow regulation is gonna help there. I think I actually want to bring a bit different topic. I think let's try to understand what comes first. First comes the need, and then there is a good, I think, idea of having one solution, but then to get there, we first need to get to one agenda. And that's where usually the biggest problem comes, because participants are having different agendas. And I think in the Nordic case, agenda was similar to the couple of the bigger players. So I think the question is how we can get to the same agenda here for the particular players. Then coming back to the regulation, I think the more strict you make it, the more descriptive you make it, the less freedom actually for execution is there. And if you limit the freedom for execution, I think nowadays you limit the innovation. So I think we need to set up the boundaries, we need to set up the box with which we are in the comfort, and we need to allow to do things within this box. And what's most important is there is the biggest and the most important thing in every innovation, its ability to fail. There is no such thing in a regulation like ability to fail. We need to acknowledge that this regulation is gonna be successful if we will allow for certain failures, and IML part and customer acceptance part is something really different, and it's very difficult to allow ability to fail. But really, we need to understand where the boundaries are. So for me, it needs to be the freedom across the Baltic universe to act, and then we need to set up this box, and then we need to allow to freedom. Most probably we will not solve ability to fail principle, but we need to be open-minded to allow for this test and experiment.
I definitely agree regarding ability to fail, that in certain cases you need to look whether the system is in place and this failing is just like an occasion or it's systemic approach. Therefore, yeah, I agree, and I know that regulator is also on one page with this. You also mentioned freedom of execution. What's your experience, Līga, regarding that? Are you free to execute?
Actually, we were developing this product and not thinking very strict about the regulation. That's from the startup's perspective, yes. And only when this product is almost ready, we started to ask additional questions to regulator and data state agency, yes. And yes, we support the opinion that innovations are born only in the free environment, and we support it.
Yes, thank you very much. We have approached almost the end of our very fruitful discussion and identified also some good findings, which I would describe in just a few words, like trust, one agenda, shared experience, freedom to work, freedom to execute the tasks, the needs, etc. After hearing all the reasons for the lack of capacity in this sector, lack of drive for Regtech industry to rise and solve and even know the commitments from the banking sector for better customer experience. My final question for each and one of you, which I would like to please answer shortly for a minute, what you will and can or would like to do to make it work from your perspective, on your side. What can you do? Let's start with Katrina.
I think that as a data protection authority, we can have more awareness activities on what does it mean data and how to deal with this. Because what we see in the practice as well, that some companies, they really want to do according to the GDPR, but they do not understand how to do it. So I think that from the supervisory authority, as I mentioned, I think that's very important to give those recommendations, consultations, so the private sector and also governmental sector, because we are responsible of both, would understand this, how to get to this compliance, and moreover maybe for people, so they would understand that the personal data is as well as some value for them, and this is a value for the companies. It's not like some disturbance, no, it's your reputation, because we talked about this possibility of failure. It's a good, but then if you failure with this personal data and you harm this person will hardly forgive you for this failure. And this is what we see as well in our work, because after the failures, these people come to us and they are not so content. So I think that this is awareness between the private sector and the companies and public sector on how to do in the right way from the beginning.
Thank you very much. It's again touching the trust issue, and of course the breaching of personal data issues will bring the trust down. Jānis, what you will do?
What I can do? Well, business is like water, and I feel the same way. So I will keep looking for opportunities, especially in financial crime and anti-money laundering. That is area that requires significant investment. So it requires economies of scale. And I will continue to seek cross-border opportunities so that whatever we come up with here, we can expand it to the neighboring countries to get the required investment in place.
Thank you. That's, I think, the area we would like to hear, that it's cross-border solutions where we will be able to work. Līga, what you will do?
I agree to Jekaterina. We will also be active in communication with regulator and other institutions, and actually we will also express our opinion in startup associations.
Thank you. It's a good place. And this one question, I think I will ask one more afterwards. Vladislav, what the banks can do?
I think from the bank's perspective, there are two things. I think we need to continue to seek for this common agenda. That's, I think, the clear thing. If there is a common agenda, then all the rest of the things is going to be possible. And I think there are multiple places where, as part of the associations, we are looking for this common agenda. There are a lot of good results out of that. But that needs to be, I think, the constant reminder, because there is a bigger common agenda. There are more solutions which can be brought as a result of collaboration with both fintech, government institution, as well as the data providers. So for me, then it's common agenda and continue seeking for collaboration and new innovation opportunities.
Thank you. It's actually one of the tasks I'm hearing. That's the first thing to do, to come around the table and become and make one agenda work. Well, and the final question for you, now this time really final question for each and one of you will be what you are waiting from other sides to do, and also this time let's start with Jekaterina. What are you expecting from private sector, and what's your...
Oh, this I expect not only from private sector but also public to respect personal data and to understand that this is value. It's not just a check or something that I have to forget. No, it is value, and it will be value in the future as well. Now we just say, maybe we do not understand, we say, oh, we have nothing to hide. But not, it's not about the hiding, it's about us, about the human beings. So that's what I expect from others.
Thank you. Let's respect human beings. Thank you. Līga, what you're expecting from regulator side?
From regulator side, we actually look for the mentoring, and we hope that they will support us and give good advices.
Thank you. That was one of the promises I heard in Jekaterina's speech regarding consultations. It's a pleasure to hear. Jānis, what you're expecting from banks?
Commitment.
Very shortly but precisely. And Vladislavs, what can fintech sector do for the banks?
I think they need to continue bringing good and credible solutions which we can easily integrate in our framework, so it can really remove some of the things which we have and which maybe not are priority things on our agenda. So we are very much open for the collaboration with the fintechs, data aggregators. Yeah, that's what we will continue to look for.
Well, thank you very much. So let's put one agenda on the table and cooperate to make the Regtech work for better customer experience. Thank you again for positive and cheering discussions, and see you in next discussions. Thank you.